You know that moment when your life feels like a house of cards, and one wrong move could bring it all crashing down. That was me, standing on the edge of losing everything, until I decided to play my own hand. This is the story of how I turned betrayal into freedom, and how one lie changed everything. I've always been a straightforward guy, not simple-minded, mind you, but I've never needed much to feel content. A big fancy house or swapping out cars every couple of years has never been my thing. For me, happiness comes from having a place to call home, good meals, a drink every now and then, and when I'm lucky, the company of a woman, ideally someone to share my life with. Honestly, I just want to feel at ease and comfortable with the person I love. My perfect day is nothing elaborate. A few hours spent fishing, tinkering on an old muscle car or pickup, then firing up the barbecue in the evening while sipping on a beer or two. After a hearty dinner, I'd wind down with a glass of bourbon, a good book, and some quiet time cuddled up with my wife. That's all I need. Simple and low maintenance. Now, I'll admit up front, I'm no Hollywood heartthrob or professional athlete. I'm a pretty average guy at 5'10" with brown hair and eyes. I'm in decent shape for a 51-year-old. Time's caught up with me, but I've learned a few tricks over the years, and my girlfriend doesn't seem to mind. Isabella, my girlfriend, is 45 and still turns heads. Her long, shiny black hair flows down to the middle of her back. She's from Costa Rica, so her striking looks are no surprise. At 5'4", she has a curvy figure, slim waist, full hips, and a chest that leaves nothing to be desired. We've been together for just over 5 years now. I met her about a year after moving here, and we've been inseparable since. Start early for me. I'm up by 5:00 a.m. Take a quick shower, get dressed, grab some coffee and breakfast, and head out to my boat. Before leaving, I always make sure to kiss Isabella goodbye. My mornings are usually spent fishing, and I sell most of my catch to local shops along the dock. Occasionally, I'll take tourists out on charters to earn a bit extra, though I don't really need it. I've saved enough over the years to live comfortably here. Life in this town doesn't require much to be enjoyable. Once I've wrapped up at the dock, I head home where Isabella usually has lunch waiting. After we eat, I clean the fish I've kept for us, then spend a couple of hours in the garage working on my latest project. Right now, I'm fixing up a 1967 GMC pickup. Once I'm done for the day, I grab a bourbon or a cold beer and relax on the porch. Evenings are for barbecue. I eat real steaks, fish, or chicken, while Isabella sips on a glass of wine and we chat about our days. After dinner, we clean up together, then settle on the couch with books in hand, talking about whatever comes to mind. Bedtime usually involves some intimacy before falling asleep in each other's arms, but even on the nights we skip it, we always cuddle. It's a peaceful, happy life. We're not complete hermits, though. Sometimes we'll head to the local bar for a dinner date, a couple of drinks and some dancing. Other nights we invite friends over for a get-together. It's a small coastal town, and I've gotten to know just about everyone. Most folks like me well enough. I thought I could live out my days here without a care in the world, until the night I saw her. Isabella and I were enjoying an evening at the bar with friends when she walked in. She was with a group of 5. 3 guys and 2 other girls, all college-aged. They looked like they were on spring break. I couldn't take my eyes off her. She stood about 5'6" with long, wavy red hair, piercing green eyes, and an athletic build. She had a stunning figure with an angelic face to match. She was the spitting image of my wife when she was younger. That's when it hit me. My beam out. You understand why Isabella and I have never tied the knot even after 5 years together. The truth is, I'm already married. Isabella knows, and she's accepted it. My wife, on the other hand, has no clue where I am or what I've been up to, and I've done everything in my power to keep it that way. But now here I was, staring at my youngest daughter standing just a few feet away. Panic set in. I leaned over to Isabella and whispered, "We need to get out of here now." She looked at me, confused. "Why? What's wrong?" I nodded toward the redhead. "See that girl who just walked in? That's exactly what my wife looked like in her early 20s. "Oh hell," Isabella muttered. Luckily, we were sitting near the door as the group moved toward the bar. Isabella and I slipped out quietly. We made some excuse to our friends, but they made some excuse to our friends. I could tell they didn't buy it. They'd want answers, and I knew I'd have to explain. For now though, All I could think about was getting as far away as possible. As the door swung shut behind us, I caught a glimpse of the bartender gesturing toward the table we just vacated. My stomach churned. If you're wondering what's going on, or might be, you've already pieced together the general situation. Let me spell it out for you. The truth is, I'm hiding from my nightmare of an ex-wife, a manipulative, cheating woman who seemed hell-bent on ruining me during our divorce. Of course, she had everything planned to destroy me unless I played by her rules. But I wasn't about to roll over and let that happen. Once upon a time, I was upon a time. Nathan Cooper. That's the name I was given at birth, and is still the name on all my legal documents, though I don't go by it anymore for very good reasons. I grew up in a small California town as the middle child in a family of 3 kids. My older brother, younger sister, and I were close enough, but I was the only one who ended up going to college. Tragedy struck during my junior year when my parents were killed in a car accident. Not long after, my brother died in a construction mishap. My sister and I had never been particularly close, and after losing the rest of our family, we drifted apart completely. We didn't even exchange greetings on birthdays or holidays anymore. I finished school with a degree in civil engineering and relocated across the country for work. Life was going well, and after a couple of years working for a large engineering firm, I met Vanessa. We were introduced at a party through a mutual friend one Saturday afternoon. She had a degree in history, but was working as a barista at a local coffee shop at the time. After talking to her for about half an hour, I started picking up on a few things. It seemed like college for her had been more about delaying the responsibilities of adulthood and less about a career path. She'd majored in something relatively easy, and it became clear that her real goal had been to snag a husband who could support her. In hindsight, I should have seen the red flags waving, but I was blinded by her beauty. She was charming, witty, and carried herself like someone much smarter than she really was. We hit it off, so I asked her out. She agreed, and for our first date, I took her to a nice restaurant, and then to see a show. We had such a good time that I asked her out again, and before long, we decided to date exclusively. By the 5th date, she was spending the night at my place. Vanessa was even more stunning without clothes on, and she seemed to appreciate how much I enjoyed taking care of her. That first night together, she wore me out, and by morning went gone at it again. I was smitten. 3 months later, I proposed. A year after that, we were married. Life seemed perfect. When Vanessa found out, she was pregnant just 6 months into our marriage. She left her barista job to become a full-time mom. Nathan Cooper was born first, and he brought so much joy into our lives. Less than 2 years later, Daniel John Cooper joined the family, and 2 years after that, Olivia Vanessa Cooper was born. They were all healthy, happy kids, and I adored them. But Olivia, my only daughter, had me completely wrapped around her little finger. We agreed that 3 kids were enough, so Vanessa had her tubes tied. Life settled into a comfortable routine. Vanessa took care of the kids while I worked to provide for the family. I was making good money as a senior engineer by the time I turned 30, and we were living the kind of life most people dream about. We bought a house in the suburbs, drove nice cars, and I even had a 1972 GTO to tinker with. In my spare time, Vanessa and I made a point of keeping our marriage strong. We scheduled monthly date nights where we'd get a babysitter and go out for dinner and a show or some other event. Our intimate life was still solid. Might be not as exciting as it had been in the early days, but we worked at it and made it a priority. We were together at least 3 nights a week, and I was always home in the evening since my job didn't require travel. As the kids grew, Vanessa threw herself into their extracurricular activities. She was the ultimate soccer mom, football mom, and dance mom. Made every effort to attend their games, performances, and events, missing no more than a handful over the years. By all appearances, we had a picture-perfect family and a happy marriage. Or so I thought. It was April 7th, and I'd recently turned 45 that day while the kids were at school. I stopped by the house for lunch after leaving a nearby construction site. As I drove down the street, I noticed a car ahead of me turning into my driveway. My heart skipped a beat as I recognized who stepped out of the car. Ryan Jackson, my best friend. Something felt off. Ryan knew my schedule and would have known I wouldn't be home at that time. I decided not to pull into the driveway. Instead, I drove past and parked a car a little further down the street, far enough away to avoid being seen but close enough to watch the front door. I watched as that lowlife strolled up to my front door, pulled out a key, and let himself in like he owned the place. Boiling, but I needed to keep my cool. I called the office and told them I was tied up at the project site, would be late getting back. With my cover set, I slipped out of my car and quietly made my way to the backyard. There was a small gap at the bottom of the bedroom blinds, and I knew the patio door blinds were usually left open. Creeping around the yard, I crouched behind some bushes that gave me a clear view through the French doors. That's when I saw her, my wife, standing there in a ridiculously short robe, kissing my so-called best friend like her life depended on it. My phone was already out, and I didn't hesitate to start recording. When they moved toward the hallway, I followed along the side of the house, angling myself to see through the bedroom window. I captured everything. She dropped the robe as soon as they crossed the threshold. I kept recording until she started undressing him. That was my limit. I turned off the video and left. Stomach churning. When I got back to the office, I was numb. I couldn't believe what I just witnessed. Vanessa had cheated on me. Vanessa, who I thought was happy, who I thought loved me. But my brain wasn't wired to sit with problems for long. I'm an engineer. I solve problems. This was just another puzzle to figure out. After a couple of hours, I had a plan forming. I called Vanessa and told her I'd be home late. It wasn't unusual for me to work overtime, so she wouldn't suspect anything. I spent the rest of the afternoon doing some serious research. First, I ordered a set of small Wi-Fi security cameras. They weren't cheap, but since I managed all our finances, Vanessa wouldn't see the bill until it was far too late. I had the cameras shipped to my office to avoid any chance of her stumbling across them. Next, I made a few subtle adjustments to our finances. Nothing big, just a few precautionary moves. The bigger steps would have to wait. Lastly, I started looking into divorce laws. And let me tell you, the picture wasn't pretty. I realized this wasn't going to be an easy battle, but I needed to be prepared. The hardest part was acting normal around Vanessa for the next week. Had to pretend nothing was wrong. I told her I thought I was coming down with a cold and kept my distance, avoiding intimacy and sticking to my side of the bed. Somehow, I pulled it off. By Friday, the cameras and software had arrived. That evening, I packed them in my briefcase and brought them home. Still sick? I kept my distance and waited for my chance. On Saturday morning, Vanessa went shopping, and I sprang into action. I installed cameras in the bedroom, the living room, and the kitchen. The recording unit was hidden in the attic, a place Vanessa never ventured. Despite everything, we were intimate that night. She was still the same beautiful woman I'd fallen for, and in that moment, I almost let myself believe none of this was real. But Sunday brought me back to reality. I spent the day doing dad stuff with the kids, grilling steaks for dinner and ending the night with a family movie. All the while, my mind was racing with anticipation and dread about what the cameras might reveal. Monday was torture. I couldn't focus at work. My thoughts kept drifting to what I might find in the footage when I got home. Vanessa noticed I was off. I told her I was dealing with a tough personnel issue at work and might have to fire someone I like. She bought it, thankfully. After dinner, I excused myself to my office under the pretense of checking on finances and investments. With the door shut, I plugged the flash drive into my laptop, began reviewing the recordings. It didn't take long to find what I was looking for. There he was, Ryan, walking through my front door like he belonged there. The footage was damning. They made out in the living room, moved to the bedroom, then made out in the living room, moved to the bedroom, disappeared into the bathroom together. When they reappeared, freshly showered, they dressed and shared another passionate kiss by the door before he left. It was all there, plain as day. I couldn't bring myself to watch more that night. I told myself I'd review it further at work the next day. That Tuesday morning, as I sifted through the recordings, I decided to listen to the audio more closely. What I heard shook me to my core. "So, when are you going to leave Nathan and run away with me?" Ryan asked. "Not for a while," Vanessa replied. "I want to wait until the kids finish high school. It would be too much of a distraction for them before then. Besides, Nathan makes really good money." Her words hit me like a freight train. I sat there staring at the screen, trying to process the betrayal. My wife, the woman I built a life with, was planning to leave me as soon as it was convenient for her, and she was using me for my income in the meantime. I knew right then and there that I couldn't let her destroy me. It was time to take action. I want to make sure we build up a decent nest egg before I take him to the cleaners, Vanessa said casually. You hate him that much? Ryan asked, sounding more curious than concerned. No, I don't hate him, she replied with a smirk. Honestly, I like him well enough. He's been a good provider and he's okay in bed. Not as good as you, of course, but he knows how to make me feel good. I just never loved him. He's always been more of a meal ticket than anything else, a friend with benefits. Really. Once I divorce him, I'm going to need as much of his assets as I can get to live comfortably. It's not about screwing him over. It's about securing my future without having to work. Why not just marry someone you're more compatible with? Ryan pressed. What? Like you? She shot back with a laugh. Are you planning to divorce your little wife? Besides, if you did, she'd bleed you dry in court, and you don't make enough to keep me in the lifestyle I want. I still end up working some crappy job like Donna is doing now. What if he finds out about us? Ryan asked cautiously. He could throw you out on the street. Vanessa laughed dismissively. He might try, but I'd shut that down real quick. If he did, I'd destroy him in the divorce. I haven't worked since 6 months into our marriage, so I'd be entitled to a few thousand a month in spousal support, plus I'd get child support for the kids, their education, healthcare costs, and a chunk of our savings and retirement. I'd probably get the house too, and full custody. He wouldn't stand a chance, and if he tries to put up a fight, I'll just cut him off from any intimacy until he caves. Believe me, he wouldn't last long. That was all I needed to hear. It was time to cut my losses and make my move. I spent the rest of the day deep in research about divorce laws in the state. It wasn't promising. The law didn't care about Vanessa's infidelity. The reality was grim. I'd likely have to pay child support, hand over the house, split our savings and retirement accounts, and pay alimony because she hadn't worked during our marriage. If she hired an aggressive lawyer, things could get even worse. I felt cornered. There was only one way out, and it was going to hurt a lot over the next 2 months. I meticulously put my plan into action. It cost a small fortune, but it was still cheaper than the alternative. I reached out to some old friends from high school who had ventured into less than legal ventures, professionally forged documents. I gave notice at work and cashed out my retirement. I refinanced the house for its full appraised value and deposited the money into a new offshore account. I knew this would ruin my credit for years, but I didn't care. It was a small price to pay. Using a bit of creativity, I created multiple offshore bank accounts under different names in places like the Cayman Islands. Over time, I funneled small, random amounts from our savings and investments into these accounts. The transfers were all below reporting thresholds, making them harder to track. I also began making regular trips to ATMs, withdrawing a couple hundred at a time. I deposit the cash into a separate account under my name, then transfer it to the offshore account. Slowly but surely, I drained our shared accounts, leaving only a few thousand behind. I even sold my beloved GTO for $220,000. That cash went straight into my offshore accounts. It was sweat, painful to part with it, but it was necessary. There was one person I confided in during this process. My old college roommate, Marcus Reeves. Marcus had become a financial advisor specializing in offshore investments, and his expertise was invaluable. While he didn't approve of my methods, he understood my desperation and offered guidance on how to make my funds untraceable. He also agreed to serve as trustee for the accounts I was setting up for my children, ensuring Vanessa couldn't touch a penny of it. Nathan, you know this is borderline illegal, he warned me one night over a secure video call. I know, Marcus, but what choice do I have? She's planning to take everything anyway. He sighed. Just be careful. Make sure the kids are taken care of. That's my top priority, I assured him. The day Vanessa left for her morning gym session, I made my final moves. I told her I was taking a comp day to relax after a stressful week. As soon as she left, I got to work. All the videos and evidence I'd collected were already backed up on Fortune drives and uploaded to a secure cloud account. I set up a mass email containing a link to the cloud files and access instruction. Then I made the final transfer, emptying every last account we had and closing them all. I redirected the mail for these accounts to a P.O. Box Marcus had agreed to check and agreed to check, destroy for the next 2 months. The shared checking account remained untouched aside from one last transfer of under $1,000 to a dummy account. It was a petty amount legally speaking and wouldn't raise any red flags. Once everything was finalized, I hit send on the email. It went out to all our friends and her family. The email contained everything: the video, the audio recordings, and screenshots of her text messages with Ryan. There was no room for denial. Before leaving the house, I reformatted my laptop, replacing the hard drive with one loaded with a nasty virus. If Vanessa tried to access anything, it would destroy the machine entirely. With my escape plan in full swing, there was no turning back. All those paperwork and account statements were gathered up, taken out to the grill in the backyard, and burned. There would be no paper trail left behind, nothing to point to where the accounts had been or even hint at their existence. By the time anyone tried to piece it all together, the money would have been moved several more times, leaving no traceable path. Once that was done, I grabbed my briefcase and a single suitcase, got into my car, and headed for the airport. Along the way, I matted for the airport. 3 stops. The first 2 were at the schools where my children attended. At each office, I dropped off a flash drive with instructions for it to be given to my child. My final stop was at Ryan's house. I handed the last flash drive to his soon-to-be ex-wife, who stared at me, baffled. As I walked away, she had no idea what was coming. When I reached the airport, I parked the car, left the keys in it, and walked into the terminal. Over the next week, I carefully covered my FOS tracks, taking 6 different flights using free rental cars, and traveling to 4 different countries. By the time I finally landed in Costa Rica, I was ready to start over with my new identity. Now, before you judge me too harshly, let me explain one last thing. I didn't leave my kids to fend for themselves. I set up a trust fund to cover all their needs: schooling, living expenses, everything. Marcus agreed to act as the trustee, ensuring the money would only be used for the kids. Vanessa couldn't touch a penny of it. The trust even covered rent and food for the kids, so she wouldn't have to worry about basic necessities. But there was nothing extra, no luxuries, no handouts for Vanessa. Of course, the house was foreclosed on after I refinanced it and paid the accounts. Vanessa and the kids had to move into a smaller rental home, and for the first time in her life, Vanessa had to find a job. She hated it, but she had no choice. By the time everything was said and done, I had over $5 million saved up in offshore accounts and investments. From Olivia's perspective, it was spring break during her junior year of college. She'd followed in my footsteps and was studying engineering. She hadn't seen me since I disappeared 6 years ago, but she understood why I left. The flash drive I left for each of them made everything clear. Hearing her mom's conversations with her lover, learning what she had planned for me, was like a punch to the gut. She couldn't believe it. It was a rough time for all of them after I left. Vanessa lost the house, and they had to move into a much smaller rental. She even had to get a job, which she despised. The trust fund I set up made sure my children never went without. They had food, clothes, and everything they needed, but they had to budget carefully. The trust was very specific. Not a dime could go to Vanessa for anything beyond essentials like rent or groceries. She needed new clothes. She had to figure it out on her own. She had shelter and food, but that was about it. Olivia stayed in that house until she graduated high school. After that, Vanessa and Ryan moved into a 1-bedroom apartment because they couldn't afford the rent anymore. Oh, and Ryan. His wife destroyed him in their divorce. He lost almost everything, and it was all because of Vanessa. Fast forward to the spring break, a couple of friends and Olivia found a great deal on a small, out-of-the-way resort in Costa Rica. Wasn't a big party spot, which was perfect since they were tired of the crazy spring break scenes they'd done before. There were 3 couples in their group. Though Olivia wasn't serious with the guy she was dating, they were just having some fun, and both of them knew it wasn't going anywhere. On their second day, the guys decided they wanted to go deep-sea fishing. The girls just wanted to relax and sunbathe on the boat. They were directed to a local bar where they could find boat owners who occasionally took charters. As they walked in and ordered drinks, Olivia caught a glimpse of an older couple slipping out the door. She only saw the side of the man's face, but something about it felt oddly familiar. Shaking it, but it felt oddly familiar. Off! They headed to the table the bartender had pointed out. The group seated there looked approachable, so Josh, one of the guys in their group, asked about booking a charter for the next day. "Oh, you must be looking for Jack," one of the men replied. "He and Isabella just left." "Damn," Josh muttered. "Is there any way to get in touch with him? We're really hoping to go out tomorrow." The man scratched his head. "Your best bet is to head down to the docks before 6:00 a.m. "Oh. He usually takes his boat out early. Look for the Olivia Joy." "What did you say?" Olivia blurted out, almost dropping her drink. "The Olivia Joy," he repeated, looking at her like she'd lost her mind. "That's Jack's boat." Olivia felt her heart skip a beat. There was no mistaking it now. Jack was her dad. "God," she whispered, her breath quickening as panic set in. "Señorita, are you all right?" one of the women asked, concern etched across her face. Ignoring her, Olivia asked, "What did you say his name was?" "Jack? Jack Thomas," came the reply. Her heart dropped. "Oh my God, it can't be," she murmured to herself. "What's wrong, Olivia?" Mark, her boyfriend, asked, looking worried. The two couples at the table exchanged curious glances when he called her by name. "The name of the boat? Do you know what my middle name is?" "It's Vanessa. Olivia Vanessa. That's my mom's name. It's a family tradition. The oldest son always gets the father's first name as a middle name, and the daughters get the mother's first name as their middle name. He named his boat after me." That's when it hit her. The glimpse of the man's face earlier. It all made sense now. "Come on, we need to go now," she said, urgency filling her voice. She turned to the two couples. "Where is his dock? I have to get there before he leaves." As I said, he usually doesn't leave until about 6:00 in the morning, one of the men started. "No, he's leaving now. He saw me. He's running again. I have to catch him before he leaves me again. I have to catch him before he leaves me again," she interrupted, her voice cracking with desperation. The bar fell silent. Her revelation hit like a thunderclap. The expressions of shock on the couple's faces and on her friends' faces would have been funny if she weren't on the edge of a breakdown. "Are you sure?" The older man asked cautiously. She nodded, tears brimming in her eyes. He stood and gestured toward the door. "Come, I'll take you there." The town wasn't big, and they made it to the docks in just a few minutes. Olivia spotted his boat almost immediately and sprinted down the dock, jumping aboard. But he wasn't there. She turned to her friends, her resolve firm. "Go back to the resort. I'll see you in the morning." "Are you sure?" Mark asked, his worry evident. "What if it's not him, or what if he tries to hurt you?" "We should stay." "No," she insisted. "I need to do this alone. This is a private matter. If I'm wrong, he won't show up until morning, and you'll see for yourselves then. If I'm right, having all of you here will just scare him away. Go, please." Reluctantly, they left, though she knew they wouldn't go far. I'd find a place to hide and watch from a distance. Sure enough, about 10 minutes later, a pair of headlights approached the dock. She ducked into the cabin and texted her brothers, Ethan and Daniel, to join her on an emergency conference call. She told them to stay silent unless she said otherwise and put them on speaker. Her phone sat on the table beside her as she waited. What the hell was she doing here? Did they track me down? Did she know I was here? Or was this some cruel twist of fate? Karma's a real piece of work sometimes. At least I saw her first. I don't think she spotted me as Isabella and I slipped out of the bar, but I couldn't take any chances. If they were looking for me, I still had a decent shot at getting away. Before they were sure, I changed enough that old photos would match me easily. And my new identity as Jack Thomas was solid. No one here had any clue about Nathan Cooper. But then again, naming the boat Olivia Joy probably hadn't been my smartest move. It was too personal, too revealing. As Isabella and I carried supplies to the boat, I glanced at the name painted on the side. Why did I have to do that? Why name it after her? I shook my head, trying to push the thoughts aside. "Come on, Isabella," I urged. "We need to get moving. A week or two out, and we can come back." Setting down a cooler on the deck, I heard a voice from inside the cabin. It was a voice from inside the cabin I knew too well. "Excuse me, are you Jack Thomas? My friends and I were hoping to charter your boat for tomorrow." My heart stopped. "Sorry, but is not available," I said quickly. "I've got another job lined up for the next 2 weeks, and I need to leave now to stay on schedule." "You'll have to find someone else." "Seriously, Daddy?" the voice shot back. cutting through my excuses like a knife. You're going to run out on your daughter again? My willpower crumbled. I tried to deny it, tried to act like I didn't know what she was talking about, but the words wouldn't come. She flipped on the light, and I turned to face her. One look at her, my baby girl, and my knees buckled. I dropped to the deck, sobbing. I'm so sorry, baby. I'm so sorry. I choked out. It was the hardest thing in the world to leave you and your brothers. You three were my whole world. But I didn't see any other way. I couldn't stay. Couldn't say goodbye. I had to leave. I had to. Dad, she said, her voice trembling with anger and hurt. You left us. You didn't even say goodbye. No word, nothing for 6 years. We didn't even know if you were alive. I know, I whispered, tears streaming down my face. I know, baby, and I'll never stop being sorry for it. But if I'd stayed, she would have found me. If I told you, she might have discovered. Believe me, baby, I've hated every single day of the last 6 years, I said, my voice cracking with emotion. Yet you were just about to run away from me again. She shot back, her words hitting me like a punch to the gut. Yes, I admitted quietly. I didn't think you saw me. I wasn't sure if you were here looking for me or if it was just some strange coincidence. If it was a coincidence, I thought it would hurt you less if you never knew I was here. If you were looking for me, well, I couldn't take the chance that you'd tell your mother or the authorities. She smirked, though her eyes were still filled with hurt. That part makes sense. After all, you're probably looking at some serious prison time if they ever manage to extradite you. And that's assuming Mom doesn't beat them to it and kill you herself. Her wicked smile almost made me laugh despite the heavy moment. I'm sorry, baby. I never wanted to put you through this, but I couldn't stay and let your mother carry out her plans. She would have destroyed me, stripped me of everything, kept me from seeing you or your brothers, forced me to fund her lifestyle while she did it. If I'd stayed, I would have lost all of you anyway. This way, at least I could make sure you were taken care of. I hated leaving, but I didn't see another way. She softened a little, though her expression remained skeptical. So, I guess you're going to haul ass out of here the moment I leave this boat, right? I chuckled at her bluntness. No, not this time. It'd take Mother at least 3 days to get here, and involving the authorities would take even longer. I'll stick around for a couple more days. Besides, I added with a grin, I've got a grin. Lead on a small group that might want to charter my boat tomorrow. Her smile returned, and this time it reached her eyes. Only if I get the family discount. Now, are you going to introduce me to your friend? After I introduced Isabella, Olivia leaned back and asked, so, why haven't you married her yet? You two seem to be in love. I sighed. 2 reasons. First, as far as I know, I'm still married to your mother. Second, I'll only marry someone using my real name, and that could make me easier to track down. It's a risk I can take. That's when she smirked, an unmistakably mischievous glint in her eye. Hey, Daniel, you're the lawyer in the family. What do you think about that? I nearly passed out when I heard his voice come through her phone. My eyes locked onto her cell sitting casually on the table beside her. Well, Dad, Daniel said, Mom actually managed to divorce you last year for abandonment, so you're free and clear on that front. As for the name thing, technically, yes, it could make you easier to find, but that would require a lot of money for an investigation or a tip from someone who knows where to look. Even then, they'd need more cash to verify everything and actually do something about it. Speaking for myself, Daniel continued after seeing all the evidence you left us, I have zero intention of giving Mom anything she could use to track you down. Besides, she and Ryan are barely scraping by. I doubt they'd ever come up with the money to start looking. Ethan chimed in next. Same here, Dad. I'm going to tell Mom I talked to you on the phone, but I'll make sure she have no idea where you were calling from. Sure, it was tough on us for a while, but that's on her. She put us all in that position. I was mad at you for a bit, but I get it now. Olivia smiled and added, see, Daddy, you don't have to worry about us. There is a catch, though. You have to invite all 3 of us to the wedding. Oh, and I'm spending summer break here, so make sure you've got room for me for a couple of months. We laughed and talked for a couple of months, while longer before they had to hang up. Olivia stepped out onto the deck and called out to her friends, inviting them aboard. She laughed when they sheepishly admitted they'd been hiding nearby, waiting to make sure she was safe. The next day was unforgettable. Everyone had a fantastic time out on the ocean. And yes, I gave them the family discount. Olivia stayed with us for the rest of the week before heading back to school. True to her word, she spent the summer with us, and I made sure the boat was ready for her brothers to join the following year. That summer, Isabella and I were married with all three of my children there to witness it. "Are you ready, princess?" I asked, my voice brimming with pride. "More than ready, Daddy," Olivia replied with a radiant smile. I could barely hold back my laughter as I walked my baby girl down the aisle. Vanessa and Ryan's faces were priceless. Ryan had been miffed when Olivia bypassed him and asked Ethan to walk her down the aisle. Little did they know it was all a setup. Ethan and Olivia had planned it perfectly to hide the fact that I would be the one giving her away. As Isabella told me later, the look on Vanessa's face when she realized I was there was absolutely priceless. I watched as Mark escorted Vanessa to the front pew, her steps stiff with irritation. It wasn't until I had completed my role, walking my radiant daughter, Olivia, down the aisle and taking my seat beside Isabella, that the reality of what was happening began to sink in for the other guests. You could feel the collective shift in the room as people started to piece it together. "Who gives this woman away to be wed?" the preacher asked, his voice clear and steady. "Her father does," I replied, my voice carrying through the silent church. I didn't need to turn around to know Vanessa's glare was fixed on my back. I could feel it, as sharp and hot as the sun. She knew the kids had been in contact with me, but she had no idea how much they knew or how often we talked. What she also didn't know was where I had been all these years or how much of my life I had rebuilt without her. Excluding her from giving Olivia away had been intentional, my final act of defiance against her, and I thought she might combust right there in the pew. Later, I learned that it wasn't until the reception that Vanessa finally realized how Olivia and Noah could afford such an elegant wedding and reception. Of course, she hadn't contributed a dime. It had been me. Every detail, from the venue to the fully hosted bar, had been covered by the wealth I'd carefully rebuilt. The ceremony itself was perfect, filled with love and joy. Noah was a remarkable young man. When Olivia introduced us earlier that week, I saw it instantly. The way he looked at her, the way she lit up when he was near. Their love was the real thing, the kind of connection that would endure the ups and downs of life. As we made our way to the reception hall, Vanessa caught up to me and hissed, "We need to talk." "I don't think that's necessary," I replied coolly. "I already know I didn't do anything wrong, and I have no interest in listening to whatever twisted excuses you have for cheating on me." "You stole all my money, you bastard," she snapped, her voice sharp with anger. I turned to face her, keeping my tone calm but firm. "Let me get this straight. You were taking my money to fund your affair, and expected me to keep paying for it. Consider what I took back pay for everything you stole from me." Without waiting for her response, I turned on my heel and walked away, leaving her fuming in the middle of the hallway. The reception was a celebration like no other. Guestham was a celebration like no other. Laughed, danced, and drank from the open bar I provided. When the DJ announced the father-daughter dance, Ryan stood up, clearly expecting to play the role. Olivia didn't even glance his way. She strode past him as if he didn't exist and as if he didn't exist, grabbed my hand, leading me onto the dance floor with a radiant smile. We swayed to the music, her head resting briefly against my shoulder. It was a moment I thought I'd never have, one stolen back from the ashes of the past. Isabella and I danced often that evening, and my sons made sure to dance with her as well. Even Ethan's wife and Daniel's fiancé asked me to dance a couple of times, and how could I say no? There was another guest at the wedding who played a significant role in my escape years ago, Marcus Reeves. He had flown in from Singapore, where he now lived, to attend the celebration. Throughout the evening, I noticed him watching Vanessa with a certain detached curiosity. After all, he had heard so much about her from me, but had never met her in person. "So that's the infamous Vanessa," he remarked quietly as we stood at the bar. "She's exactly as you described her." "Thanks for everything, Marcus," I said sincerely. "I couldn't have done any of this without you." He smiled and raised his glass. To new beginnings. Ryan, on the other hand, wasn't having such a great time. Both women flatly rejected him when he asked them to dance, adding to his humiliation. He'd been excluded from every major moment of the day, walking Olivia down the aisle, giving her away, and the father-daughter dance, fueled by liquid courage and a growing sense of frustration. Ryan decided to confront me. It started with him staggering over to Isabella and asking her to dance. She didn't even dignify him with a response. She looked at him for a long moment, her expression one of mild disgust, like a person staring at an insect that had crawled onto their plate. Then she turned back to her conversation with the couple beside her as if he wasn't even there. Ryan's face turned ghostly white before flushing red with rage. Silent as people stopped their conversations to watch the brewing storm, I had already moved into position behind him when he reared back, intending to strike Isabella. I caught his arm mid-swing, spun him around, and looked him in the eye. "You've worn out your welcome," I said calmly. "Go home, sleep it off, and don't ever try to lay a hand on my wife again. If you do, I promise you'll spend the next week in the hospital." He was too drunk and too enraged to listen. He swung at me again, 3 times, to be exact. Each attempt was clumsy and slow, and I blocked them with ease. "3 strikes," I said, my voice cold and steady. "You're out." The wall behind him supported his weight as I landed a series of punches, each one calculated and controlled. I finished with a few well-placed knee strikes to his groin. By the time his legs gave out, he crumpled to the floor, his face a mixture of pain and humiliation. Marcus and a few other men helped carry him outside, away from the cameras that had captured the scene inside. Once clear, I delivered 3 more swift kicks to his groin. "It'll be a long time, if ever, before you manage to get it up again," I said, before leaving him there to nurse his wounds. Now, you might be wondering if I faced any legal consequences for what happened. Oh, Vanessa tried. She wanted nothing more than to see me behind bars. But she had no case. First, she had no documentation of my financial dealings. I destroyed every statement and receipt, and she'd never taken an interest in our account. As far as the records showed, we'd been living paycheck to paycheck. Second, by the time she filed for divorce on grounds of abandonment, all assets were grounds of abandonment. Gone. She settled quickly, agreeing to a straightforward division of non-existent property. Third, all 3 kids were firmly on my side. They testified that I was living in a rundown house, scraping by on the little money I made selling fish at the market. Finally, Ryan's actions at the wedding, captured on multiple phones, painted him as the aggressor. My calm, measured response only strengthened my position. In the end, Vanessa had no leverage. I walked away unscathed while locked away unscathed, while she was left to face the consequences of her own actions. All Vanessa could prove against me was petty theft for less than $500, and even that was a stretch. By the time she tried to pursue it, the statute of limitations had long since expired. Still, in the spirit of being the nice guy, I agreed to cut her a check for 60% of what was in the checking account on the day I left. It wasn't much, $5,596 to be exact, but it satisfied her claims and left me with a clean conscience. As for the videos from the wedding, they painted a very clear picture. Ryan had been the one to attack first, taking a swing at my wife and then at me. The recording showed I'd given him every chance to walk away, but he'd insisted on pushing things too far. When it went to review, the incident was officially ruled as self-defense. Ryan, on the other hand, didn't fare so well. He ended up in the hospital for 2 weeks, recovering from his injuries, and in the process, he lost the dead end and job he'd been clinging to. The fallout from that day proved too much for Vanessa and Ryan's fragile relationship. With Ryan unable to perform anymore, the lack of intimacy left them with little else holding them together. Vanessa eventually divorced him, marking yet another chapter of failure in her life. Meanwhile, Isabella and I chose to remain in Costa Rica. Sure, we could have returned to the States if we wanted to, but we'd grown to love the laid-back lifestyle and affordable cost of living here. The vibrant sunsets, the smell of the ocean, and the simplicity of life suited us perfectly. Besides, our kids and grandkids made it a point to visit us regularly, and we made trips back to the States a few times a year to see them. Eventually, we even bought a larger home with enough space to comfortably accommodate the whole family whenever they came to stay. Marcus visited us often too, sometimes bringing his new wife, Sophia, a Brazilian architect had met during a business trip to Rio. They were a perfect match, both intelligent, adventurous, and with a shared love of good food and travel. Over time, my anger toward Vanessa began to fade. While I would never love her again or consider her a part of my life in any meaningful way, I came to feel she had suffered enough. She'd lost everything she'd valued. Her comfort, her status, her relationship with Ryan, and the financial security she once took for granted. Just to give myself some closure, I agreed to rent my old house to her when she decided to move to Costa Rica. I even helped her get a job as a waitress at the local bar. It wasn't much, but it allowed her to keep a roof over her head and food on the table. Life had humbled her in ways I never could have imagined, and there was a certain satisfaction in seeing her work for the things she used to take for granted. Interestingly, Isabella and I started frequenting that bar more often than we had in the past. It gave us a certain ironic amusement to have Vanessa serving us drinks. Every time she brought a tray to our table, I could see the simmering regret in her eyes. She didn't dare cross the line, though I'd mad across the line. It's crystal clear that any act of spite, whether spitting in our drinks or tampering with our food, would leave her homeless and unemployed in a foreign country. Worse yet, she'd lose any remaining connection she had to our children and grandchildren. With those stakes in mind, Vanessa went out of her way to ensure we were well taken care of every time we visited. Today was one of those days when life felt perfect. Isabella came out of the house with steaks and sea bass in hand for me to throw on the grill. The kids and their families would be arriving soon, and the smell of the meat sizzling over the open flame would greet them like a warm hug. I smiled as I watched Isabella head back inside to check on the house cleaner we'd hired to prepare for the gathering. I couldn't help but chuckle when I overheard her say, "Come on, Vanessa, hurry up, the guests will be here soon. We're not paying you to sit around and twiddle your thumbs." Ah, Vanessa, even after all, this time, there was still a part of me that held on to a small measure of resentment. Maybe it was petty. But seeing her reduced to this, the former queen of our suburban life now working as a house cleaner, was a reminder of just how far she'd fallen. Still, life had moved on, and it had moved on beautifully. I had everything I could have ever wanted: my wife, my children, my grandchildren, and the satisfaction of knowing that I'd not only survived but thrived. Marcus and Sophia would be joining us later for dinner too, completing our circle of trusted friends who had become like family. As I flipped the steaks and sea bass on the grill, I couldn't help but smile. Life, I thought to myself, has a funny way of evening the score. Subscribe and stay one step ahead of cheaters, and trust me, the next story makes this one look like a fairy tale.